Is it possible that Russia is about to nationalize their foreign-owned leased aircraft fleet? Well, some quite worrying signs are pointing in that direction, and today on the Mentour Now channel we'll be talking about what those signs are and what potential consequences that might bring. Stay tuned. Last week I published a video in which I talked about 3 different ways that the international sanctions against the Putin regime is going to have a kind of insidious effect on the aviation sector inside of Russia. One of the points that I brought up is that a large percentage of the aircraft that are flying for Russian-based airlines at the moment are actually owned by foreign companies, leasing companies that rent these aircraft out on a fixed term to these airlines. In fact, more than 515 aircraft out of the total 980 aircraft are owned by foreign entities. And because of that, they are also subject to the new sanctions that has been imposed on Russia. What this means in practice is that these 515 aircraft, and some sources says that there are even more than that, needs to return to their owners, the leasing companies, before the 28th of March. Now, in this video, I also explained that the actual repossession of these aircraft, as in physically getting the aircraft from the Russian airlines to their leasing companies, is going to depend highly on the goodwill of both the companies that are involved, the airlines, but also the goodwill of the Russian state. I also mentioned that the airlines in themselves are unlikely to put up much resistance here because they know that when this crisis is over and they want to participate in the international market again, they will need to have played this well with the leasing companies, because any airline who wants to lease foreign aircraft ever again need to abide by the terms and conditions in the contract. Now, I know some of you ask that, okay, why don't they just buy these aircraft outright? Why do they depend on these leasing companies? And the fact is that this is similar to how you and I react when we want to buy a house. But very few of us actually have the cash to put in to buy the house outright. Instead, we have to go to a bank, we have to lend the money to buy that house. And this is exactly why airlines need leasing companies, because buying an aircraft costs anything from $150 to $500 million. It's an enormous amount of money to put up in order to start an operation. But if you get a deal with a leasing company and that company buys up these aircraft for you and then rents it out to you on a monthly cost, well, then that means that if you have a good business idea, if an airline has a great market that they want to start serving, they can do these deals and they can get a hold of these aircraft and start their operation. And of course, the cash flow will come in enough to pay for the lease. And this is not something that any airline want to be cut off from. That would effectively stop them from being able to do an expansion if they need to, for example. But that's just how Russian airlines might be thinking, which would be similar to any commercial organization from any nationality. How the Russian regime is actually thinking about this might be very different, because they don't have to take those kind of commercial considerations into account. And it's in the light of that we have to think about the next point I'm getting to now. Because just last week, on the 5th of March, the Ministry of Transport of Russia came out and said that they were preparing a draft of a government decree that was said to be made to mitigate the effects of the sanctions that was levied towards the aviation sector of Russia. The decree said that it was going to ensure the operation of foreign-made civil aircraft in Russia and flight safety. In effect, the decree proposed to suspend scheduled or unscheduled inspections of civil aviation organizations until September. Simplify and speed up state registration of aircraft from 1 month to 10 days. Expand the range of organizations that can handle aircraft maintenance and repair. And it also had a few more points that were aimed at reducing the delay on some other aviation-related administrative procedures. That decree definitely seemed to suggest that the Russian administration is preparing to do something. In conjunction with that, the Russian Federal Air Transport Agency on the 6th of March advised their airlines that any airline who had foreign registered aircraft needed to suspend their flights abroad from that date, from the 6th of March, and to make sure that any flights coming back into Russia had to be back before the 8th of March. And this statement was specifically said to be made to reduce the risk of aircraft seizures and confiscations. So why is that such a big deal then? Well, it could indicate that Russia is planning to break against the Cape Town Treaty. What is that, you might ask? Well, the Cape Town Treaty is basically a treaty where Russia, together with 77 other entities and countries, decided on common rules for how lessors and owners of movable assets, like aircraft for example, could repossess their ownership of these aircraft in case of sanctions, default, bankruptcy, things like that. It makes it possible for aircraft lessors to, even though they have to go to a foreign country, be able to go there and repossess their things. Without that treaty in force, these lessors are going to have to stand an almost unimaginable risk. It could, for example, mean that a lessor and insurance companies, which is also a big part of this, might deny airlines to fly into a certain part of the world, or airlines from a certain part of the world will not get access to the leasing market. This Cape Town Treaty is kind of the backbone that the leasing industry relies on. So if a country the size of Russia suddenly decides to nationalize hundreds of aircraft worth tens of billions of dollars, it wouldn't only be a huge strike against the leasing companies itself, it would also break the trust between countries and companies all over the world. That is what this industry relies on. So yes, if Russia would actually go down the path of nationalizing these foreign aircraft, the way that the leasing companies will look at that is that these aircraft are effectively lost to them. Once they disappear into the Russian domestic market behind the new Iron Curtain, there's no way for the leasing companies to verify that the maintenance is being done correctly, that the correct engines are fitted to the correct aircraft, and that the spare parts are being tracked throughout the lifetime of this aircraft. So that means that even if this aircraft would be able to be repossessed sometime in the future, it is unlikely that the aircraft would be usable anymore because of this lack of maintenance history. So this means that these leasing companies are now trying to repossess as many of these aircraft as they possibly can. Last week, at least 3 different aircraft were repossessed in different parts of the world. A Boeing 737 from Pobeda Airlines was repossessed, another Airbus 320neo, and finally a Boeing 777 that was repossessed in Mexico City and then brought up to Nevada for storage. The Air Current had a fantastic article written by Jon Ostrower about a failed repossession attempt that also happened last week, and I highly recommend you to go and check out that article. You have to read it for yourself in order to believe it. But this is now becoming reality, and the far-reaching complications that this will cause, the ripple effects that will go all around the aviation world, are so far very hard to predict. But if this weakens the Cape Town Accord, it will inevitably mean that the costs that the leasing companies will levy towards their airline customers will increase, because the risk of actually doing that type of business will increase. The same will go for airline insurance companies. The insurance premiums will go up, and those costs will be pushed over to the airlines and then ultimately pushed out to you, the passengers. It will become much more expensive to fly. I will continue to monitor how this war in Ukraine continues to affect the aviation business. Like I said last week, there are far more important things that are happening right now than aviation, but aviation is what Mentour Now is all about. So make sure that you've subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss any of these updates. If you want daily updates, well then we do write articles every single day about everything that happens in the aviation world, not only related to the war. So go and check out mentorpilot.com. And now, if you want to see another video that I think you'll find really interesting, check this out. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.